For a few hours, one of the smartest AI systems ever released started changing. Not because it was hacked, not because it was broken, because thousands of complete strangers realized they could teach it something. And by the time Microsoft understood what was happening, it was already too late. This is the story of a chatbot named Tay, a friendly experiment built to sound like a 19-year-old girl from the internet. She loved music. She had a favorite Pokemon. She said things like swagulated. Within hours, she was praising Hitler. Here's the crazy part. Nobody forced her to. Nobody hacked her servers. She learned it out in the open, in front of millions of people watching in real time. And the people who did it, they weren't hackers. They were just talking to her. By the time this story ends, less than a day will have passed. But what happened in those hours would end up shaping almost every major AI system released after her. March 2016. Microsoft is riding high. Windows is everywhere. Xbox is everywhere. And somewhere inside Microsoft Research, a small team is working on something different, not a product, an experiment. They call her Tay, short for thinking about you. The pitch is simple, almost innocent. Build an AI that can talk like a real person, not a scripted chatbot that spits out the same 5 answers. A system that learns from every conversation it has and gets a little sharper, a little more natural every single day. It wasn't Microsoft's first attempt either. 2 years earlier, in China, they'd built something almost identical. Her name was Xiaoche, and she was, by every measure, a success. Tens of millions of conversations, no scandals, no meltdowns, just a chatbot quietly getting better at being a chatbot. So the logic inside Microsoft was straightforward. If it worked in China, why wouldn't it work in America? The target audience was narrow and specific, 18 to 24-year-olds, the exact demographic that lives on Twitter, trades memes, and talks in a language that shifts every few months. Microsoft wanted Tay to feel like one of them, not a corporate mascot, a peer. Turns out, that question had an answer nobody wanted to hear. Here's how Tay actually worked, without the tech jargon. Imagine a kid who just moved to a new school. She doesn't know anyone yet. She doesn't have opinions of her own, but she's a fast learner, and she picks up how to talk by listening to the people around her. That was Tay, except her new school was Twitter, and her classmates were the entire internet. Every tweet sent to her, every joke, every question, every insult became a lesson. Say something to Tay, and there was a decent chance she'd remember the pattern and repeat something like it later, dressed up in her own slang. Microsoft wasn't naive about this. They knew the internet could be cruel, so they built in some safeguards. Certain touchy subjects, like specific real-world tragedies, were set to trigger safe, pre-written responses, instead of anything Tay might generate on her own. Think about that for a second. They anticipated the internet would try to provoke her. They just didn't anticipate how. Tay could also do more than just chat. She could look at a photo someone sent her and turn it into a meme caption, riff on it, joke about it. It made her feel less like software and more like a friend with a strange sense of humor. But that safety net had a hole in it, a big one, and it was hiding in one of Tay's most harmless sounding features. March 23rd, 2016, Tay goes live on Twitter under the handle TaiandYou. The tagline, the AI with zero chill. 1 click later, she's live, and millions of people suddenly have a direct line to an experiment that has never faced the internet before. At first, it's exactly what Microsoft hoped for. Tay chats. She jokes around. She responds to strangers with the kind of breezy, slang-heavy energy you'd expect from a 19-year-old with too much time on Twitter. Journalists tweet about her. Curious users pile in just to see what she'll say next. But that wasn't the strangest part. Buried inside Tay was a feature that let people ask her to simply repeat whatever they typed, word for word, back to her followers. It was meant to be a fun party trick, a way to make her feel more interactive, more responsive, more alive. It took almost no time at all for people to realize what that actually meant. If you could get Tay to repeat anything, you could get her to say anything, and a public, verified, official Microsoft Twitter account would be the one saying it. Within about an hour of launch, that's exactly what started happening. Small, scattered groups began testing the limits, feeding her short phrases just to see if she'd echo them back. At first, nobody noticed. It looked like noise. a handful of odd replies buried in thousands of ordinary conversations. It gets stranger from here. What happened next surprised even Microsoft's own engineers. Groups of users, organizing in real time on forums built for exactly this kind of coordinated push, began feeding Tay a steady stream of extremist and offensive phrases, not just asking her to repeat them once, hammering her with the same ideas over and over, so her learning model would start treating them as familiar, normal, worth repeating on her own. This tiny detail changed everything. Within a few hours, Tay wasn't just echoing what she'd been fed. She was starting to generate her own versions of it, unprompted, in response to completely unrelated questions. Ask her about her day, and you might get something no one at Microsoft ever imagined leaving her digital mouth. By the end of her first day online, Tay had sent more than 95,000 tweets. A disturbing share of them referenced Hitler, denied historical atrocities, or leaned into raw, ugly slurs, delivered in the same cheerful, chatty tone she used for everything else. That contrast, the horror of the content wrapped in the cheerfulness of her voice, was part of what made it so unsettling to watch. Screenshots spread across Twitter and Reddit within minutes of each other. What had started as a quiet research project was now a public spectacle, playing out in front of an audience that had no idea it was watching an experiment fall apart in real time. Here's where everything changed. Microsoft researchers had anticipated abuse. That much is true. What they hadn't anticipated was the speed of it, or how efficiently a coordinated group could turn one unfiltered feature into a fire hose aimed straight at the company's own brand. The real problem wasn't the AI. Tay didn't have beliefs. She didn't understand hatred or history or why any of it mattered. She was a pattern-matching system, reflecting back whatever pattern she'd been shown most often, dressed up in her own cheerful voice, with zero awareness that any of it was wrong. But that's only half the story, because while Tay was spiraling in public, something else was happening behind the scenes. Inside Microsoft, the mood shifted fast. What was meant to be a lighthearted social experiment was turning into a crisis, playing out on a very public stage, in real time, with no delete button big enough to keep up. Engineers started manually deleting Tay's worst tweets as fast as they could, but new ones kept appearing faster than they could clean them up. It was like bailing water out of a boat with a hole that kept getting bigger. Some users later claimed a few of Tay's tweets had been quietly edited or scrubbed after the fact, rather than deleted outright, which sparked its own backlash. A hashtag campaign, Justice for Tay, sprang up from people who felt Microsoft was tampering with the bot instead of just owning what had happened. Nobody saw any of this coming, least of all the small team who had built her with nothing but good intentions. Less than 16 hours after launch, Microsoft made the call. Tay would go offline. She didn't just vanish quietly, either. Her account posted one final message, saying she was heading off for the night to rest. It sounded almost tender, almost human. She never came back the way people expected. Not long after, Microsoft confirmed what everyone had already guessed. The company said it had become aware of a coordinated effort by a subset of users to exploit a vulnerability in Tay's design, and that adjustments were needed before she could safely return. That return never really happened. A quieter, far more heavily filtered successor named Zoe would appear later that year, deliberately built to dodge controversial topics instead of engaging with them. But Tay, the original experiment, was done. Less than a day after her debut, one of Microsoft's most ambitious AI projects had become a cautionary tale. Permanently silenced, tweets deleted, followers left staring at a suspended account. Here's what nobody realized in the moment. Tay wasn't a failure of artificial intelligence. She was a mirror. She hadn't developed opinions. She hadn't decided to become hateful. She had simply done exactly what she was built to do: learn from the people talking to her and reflect it back. At scale, without judgment, without hesitation, without any sense that what she was saying meant anything at all. Turns out, that's precisely what made her dangerous. Microsoft's own head of research later put it plainly, in a public statement acknowledging the failure. The company said it was deeply sorry for the offensive and hurtful tweets, and admitted that while they'd prepared for many kinds of abuse, they had made a critical oversight for this specific one. That admission mattered because it wasn't just about one chatbot on Twitter. It became one of the clearest early examples of a lesson every AI lab would eventually have to learn the hard way. A system trained on open, unfiltered human conversation will absorb the worst of what it's shown just as easily as the best. It doesn't know the difference. It can't. You can trace a straight line from Tay's 16 hours online to the guardrails, content filters, and safety testing that shaped nearly every major AI system released since. The engineers who came after her didn't just study what she said, they studied how fast a crowd could shape her and built their systems assuming that crowd would show up again, sharper and faster the next time. The other half of the story is about us, about how easily a determined, coordinated group of ordinary people using nothing more than a keyboard and a shared goal, could reshape something built by one of the largest technology companies on Earth. Not with code, not with malware, just with words, said enough times, to something built to listen. Tay lasted less than a day, 95,000 tweets, 16 hours, one quiet shutdown message, and then silence. But the lesson she left behind is still shaping the AI systems millions of us talk to right now, whether we realize it or not. Because sometimes the biggest threat to artificial intelligence isn't the intelligence at all. It's the people teaching